really anything yet. And I'm going to do this on Windows because that's what you guys are using. Here's my notes here. Uh, all right. So, yeah, so Git is a version control system. Uh, it keeps a history of what files have changed, when they've changed, and who changed them. Um, and in the commit message, you put why you made the changes. This is useful because it allows you to go backwards and forwards in time in a project and sort of keep track of when was what done and why. Um, the Git history can have multiple diverging branches. So if you're working on a feature and you want to work on that feature in a silo, sort of on its own, outside of all of the other features that you're working on, you can make a branch and then just work on that feature in that branch. Um, you might also have branches for stable releases that you want to support for a long time to backport fixes from a development branch. I see that a lot too. Git is a distributed VCS, so like the old VCSs were all centralized, and Git really popularized the idea of the distributed VCS. So every developer who forks or clones a repo has their own history that they have on their own local machine, and you can do pretty much everything on your computer without access to a remote branch. The only thing you need, the only thing you need the internet for is to push your changes onto a remote branch, pretty much. Uh, so Git can merge changes from one branch to another branch. That's important, like we said, if you're doing feature branches to work on a feature, eventually you want to merge that history back onto the history of the main branch, and Git can do that. So GitHub is just a service for hosting and managing Git projects. And it's not the only one. There's GitLab, there's SourceForge, there's Bitbucket, and you can use cgit and Bugzilla. There's a number of other things, but GitHub is pretty dominant at the moment, so that's what we're using today. Um, GitHub, the great thing about GitHub is it's built around Git, and it has features which sort of emphasize the distributed nature of Git. So everybody can just click a button to make a fork. Everybody can work on their own thing, and then if you want to suggest changes to a repo, you can just click a button to submit a pull request. Um, Git is a suite of command line tools. So a little bit about how like these large command line suites work is you have like a command and then a subcommand and then arguments for the subcommand. So it's sort of like a class and then a method and then parameters, right? And here I just created an empty test repo. Um, mhm. So right, you can't the command line. So the thing that sets Git apart is right that it keeps track of the history of the project. Um, and that's sort of like that's the main point of a version control system is it's keeping track of all of the changes that a file goes through. So not only can you delete a file, you keep a record of the fact that you've deleted the file and you've kept every version of the file that you deleted. So if you decide, hey, I made a mistake, actually, I didn't need to, I need this file back. you can restore that from the history. But let's see, where am I? Okay, help. So Git has help for all of these subcommands. Pretty comprehensive help, but kind of terse, but a great reference. So if you need help, you can just type git help, help. How do I use the help? And on git bash, it will open an HTML page to describe help and all of the arguments that you can use with it. All of Git's commands has these files. Some of them can be really long because they have a lot of features. But definitely, something I wouldn't read through these, but if you're looking for something, an option and how to use it, you can use Control F to find it. So you create a project with Git init. We've already done this with the help, the test branch, the test repo. I'm going to remove that. So if you do git init test, that will create a new directory called test, and then it will put the empty repo in that. Or I can make dir test and then cd into test and then just do git init. That creates this .git file. Now the dot in sort of Unix land, which git bash sort of emulates, the dot before a directory or a file makes it hidden by default. Just I guess is a way to avoid cluttering your directory tree. So to actually see it, you have to do ls-a for all. And if you look inside Git, you can see, this is all of the metadata that Git keeps track of about your project. And people get deep into that. I'm not going to today because I'm not prepared to do that. So you configure Git with git config. So Git wants you to have a username. This example here is actually wrong. Git wants every commit to be associated with at least a name and an email address. So I'm going to do that, config this test branch. And that's how configuration works. Now I put local there. That means it applies to this local repo. If I go into .git config, you can see all of these. This is where all of these options actually live, and you can see my name and my email address right there. You can see changes with git diff. I don't have any changes yet, but that would show a list of commits, and you can show ranges of changes like git diff commit 1, commit 2, like that. Alright, so I'm going to create a file. Okay, and to add this file to your actual history, first you have to stage the file, and you do that using the add subcommand. And if we type git status, we can show like all of the files that are staged. All of the files that have changes that are unstaged will also be listed in red, and so you can see what will actually go into your next commit. To make the commit, I'm going to type git commit, not commit commit, git commit. And if you set up git bash to set code, VS Code as your default editor, this should just automatically open in VS Code. Now here we have this first line is sort of the I forget what you even call it, but the title, the header line of your commit, and this has by convention a maximum number of columns that you want to go to. I think it's 51 columns by default, but VS Code, if you go over that number of columns, the line will turn red. And you want to keep it that number of columns so that when you have a summary, the header is always on one line. So right now we're just going to put initial commit. Save the file and close it. And if we go into get status, we'll see there's nothing to commit. The working tree is clean. If we type get log, we'll see a history. Hey, we made this initial commit. Um, let's see. Oh, here I put a note of how to change the default editor. If you didn't click that button while installing uh, Git Bash, you'll want to set your editor to VS Code like this. Um, Otherwise, it will use Vim as the default editor, and that's a whole thing. I put a link here that I want to go over, so I'll post this in the chat. Copy. And I try to follow these. I'm not very good about not using a period. I use a period most of the time. Uh, just, I don't know, the journalist in me wants to end sentences with a period. Come on. But these are the general rules that people try to follow. Different projects may have different standards. Some are very relaxed about it, but generally you want to follow these rules, and people will like your commit messages if you do that. Commit messages must have a subject line, that's the first line here, and may have body copy. They must be separated by a blank line. The subject line must not exceed 50 characters. We talked about that. The subject line should be capitalized and must not end in a period. The subject line must be written in the imperative mood. So in here in this example it says summarize changes in around 50 characters or less. It doesn't say here I summarized changes in around 50 characters or less or something like that. The body copy must be wrapped at 72 columns. I think VS Code may or may not do that automatically by default. I can't remember. So, but the body copy must only contain explanation as to the what and why and never how. The latter belongs in documentation and the implementation. So, a lot of times my commits will only be the subject line, and that will summarize what was done, and the why of it may be self-explanatory. If it's not self-explanatory, um, then you want to go into why you made the change in the body copy here. So that's what that's for. Uh, right. Yeah. So you can think about the history. You can think about the history as documentation. Just like you want code to be readable so that it's self-documenting, so that you can find out later what it does. I like to think of it like this. Even if you're working on something for yourself, in 6 months, that person who wrote that code 6 months ago is a completely different person. You have no idea what they were doing or why they were doing it. And so if you go back to your own code, and I have found this out the hard way, and it's not readable and it's terrible, you're not going to have any idea what's going on or why you did that. And the commit messages, the log messages are the same way. Um, for yourself and for the people you're working for in the future, you want these to be clear and sort of descriptive. Um, some ways to view changes. I went over get log, so that will show a list of all of the changes without arguments. If you do get help log, it will list all of the different options, and there are different options for filtering the log to look for more specific things. So to see what changed in the most recent commit, and I do this a lot, get diff head tilde, and this is a unknown revision or path not in the working tree. What? Oh, get diff. What did I type? I must have typed get diff log or something. Diff head. That's weird. I've never seen that before. Well, usually what will happen is, oh, I know why. I know why. So usually what will happen, I'll come back to this and do this after the next commit, actually. So how to create a branch, get branch hello world. That will create a branching history that I talked about earlier. So I'm going to leave hello world alone for now, and then I'm going to make another change to test.js. This is in the main branch. So console.log test2, right? So if I type get status, we see that there's a file that's been modified and has not been staged for commit. So I'm going to add it to the staging area. You see now it's a change to be committed, and then I'm going to add a commit, and I'm introducing another an argument for commit here with M. If you know you're only going to have a subject line, this is a quick shortcut to do that. Add another console log, and boom, I just made another commit. So now we're going to check out. This is how you switch from one branch to another branch. Hello world. So now we're in a different version of the history of the project. And if we open up test.js, we'll see we've only got the one line because that's where we diverged in hello world, is from that first commit. So I'm going to add another commit on the hello world branch, hello world, where we change that text. And to what you were saying earlier, this is going to create a conflict, and we're going to learn about how to resolve that conflict in a minute. Get add test.js, get commit m, use hello world text. So get log, and we have on this branch also two commits. Initial commit and then use hello world text, but we don't have the commit to add the second commit log because this is a different version of the history. Now when you're working on a feature branch like this, before you make a pull request, a lot of the time what you'll want to do is use get rebase. So get rebase will take all of your changes and rebase it on top of another branch. So that when you send a pull request, this is useful because when you send a pull request to the main branch on the main repo on GitHub, the person who is reviewing your code and says, okay, yeah, I'll accept this change, can just click merge, and then there will be no conflicts because all of your changes will go on top of the most recent change in the GitHub history. But that means we do have to deal with, whenever we're doing rebase, these conflict resolutions. So I'm going to get rebase main. And hey, it tries to auto merge and it finds out that it can't because there's a conflict. From Git's perspective, we modified the same line in both the main branch and the hello world branch. So we have to resolve this conflict. So if we look and we see that we have this test.js file still, we can open it and we'll see this weird output. What it's telling us is that these lines are different in the two different branches, and we have to figure out what it's supposed to look like in the final version. And VS Code gives us some handy options here to accept the current changes. Okay, that will show us the main branch version. Accept the incoming changes, that will accept the Hello World version, or accept both changes, which will just sort of put them together like this. We can also compare changes to see exactly what lines changed where. So what I'm going to do is accept both changes, but then I'm going to move this up. I forget how you do that in VS Code. There we go. And delete this line because that's what we want. We want the first line to be hello world and the second line to be test2. And I'm going to save the file. Okay, and then if we now need to stage test.js, add test.js, and then we need to type git rebase dash dash continue, and that will continue the process of rebasing your history on top of the main branch history. And that will add a commit. This will create a new commit in place of your old commit, and the commit message is fine, so I'm just going to save and close it. All right, if we type git log, we see now that we have 3 commits. We have the initial commit, we have the commit where we added another console log, and then we have the commit where we use the hello world text. And if we type git diff head tilde, we can see exactly what lines changed from the perspective of Git. And you can see why it ended up being a conflict is because from the perspective of Git, both lines changed and not just the first line. So now if we want to go back to the main branch, we can git merge hello world, and that happens automatically because there's no conflicts. We type git log, and we can see the history is the same. Oh yeah, I didn't. If you start making a merge or you start a rebase and a like conflict shows up and you're like, okay, I don't want to deal with this right now, man. You can just do merge dash dash abort, or if you're doing a rebase, rebase dash dash abort, and that will reset the state of the uh, area that you're working in, your workspace, to where it was before you started the rebase or the merge. Let's see. I did get rebase. Continue. Okay, and now we're in the last part. I just need a volunteer to send me a link to a project that they've worked on so that I can make a change and send you a pull request. Copy and paste will work. Let's see here. This is a VM. Let's see. It does work. Magic. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm logged in and I'm going to create a fork by just clicking. Say again? Oh, maybe. Oh, right. Right back in the beginning, yeah. Oh, man. Right. 10 months ago, man. Wow. Okay. So I'm just going to click on fork and it's going to create a new repo on my account. Okay. Now I'm going to copy this link and just do git clone paste shift insert. For some reason that's weird. HTTPS is not supported. That's weird. It should be supported. I'll have to figure out later why it's not, because I don't use git bash usually. Mm, so I guess it would be git github.com Aaron B. Payton Bloom -1.git, like that. What the heck, man? Okay. Ah, okay. That's some term. This like weird terminal from Git Bash doesn't like the fact that I tried pasting with Control V, and it inserted some hidden character or something. That's okay, and it inserted a Control V character, I guess. That's interesting. Shift insert, yeah. Well, it's different on my computer. Like this is, yeah, this is in a virtual machine. I don't usually use Windows, so the rules are a little different. That's bizarre. Okay, so now we have this local version of my fork of the Bloom repo on my computer. So we go to Bloom 1. Uh, yeah, let's just open bloomherb.html, and I'll use VS Code for that. Okay, and let's just change the landing page title to Get Aaron's Git class is the best. So we type git diff, and we see that, and we're going to add that to the staging area. Um, Bloom herb git commit add example projects. Okay. Yeah. Uh, I'm going to reset what I did because I screwed something up. Git config local user.name email. Okay. Aaron's get class is the best. Okay, add Bloomherb get commit example get log. Okay, example commit for pull request. Now I want to push it, so let's try to do that. That's interesting. Sure. Is that going to work? This is some git bash stuff that I don't know about, so let's see if I can push it this way. What is that actually going to do? Authorize. Sure. Okay. So that's been pushed. So if I refresh this page, I should have done this on a feature branch, but it'll be fine. So now I'm one commit ahead of Walrus Dog Main. Walrus. Why is Walrus so hard to say? I did not know I had trouble saying that. So now we're a commit ahead. So how do you actually do the pull request? I forget. Do I need to go to? Yeah, okay. So we can click on this little contribute thing, and we can click on open pull request. Uh-huh. This will send you a request on your main branch. So I'm going to create the pull request. Example commit for pull request, and this is where you would explain to the maintainers of the project what your pull request is, what changes you made, and why you think it should go in the main project. You don't really have to merge this because it's just an example. Create pull request. Now if we go to your account and your project page, if you click on this pull requests tab, you'll see my pull request, and then there will be a button down here. You can't see it on my screen, but it just says to merge, and there are no conflicts with the base branch. So all you have to do is click merge, and GitHub will create a merge commit for you. Right. So when you click on that, what GitHub does is it creates a commit that merges the changes. Now, some projects don't like this, that it has this extra commit that says merging from branch from so and so. But for our purposes, it's fine. Like the Linux kernel has its own way of merging branches, merging changes from other people. They actually have like an email newsletter, and people send patches like it's 1995, and that works for them. But for us, just clicking on the merge request um, button will work fine, and it will work more or less automatically as long as the person making the change properly rebase their changes so that there's no merge conflicts. You can just click that button and it should just work. Um, but yeah, I think that's everything that I wanted to cover. That should get everybody started to. A few points that I wanted to make. So I think most people, because we didn't really go over what Git was for or why we were using it, just made one commit at the end, and like their only commit is like initial commit. What you want to do is make your first commit as early as possible, and then make new commits as often as possible, because this is your way. Like I know Herb would often talk about, hey, if you broke it or something. Well, if you're keeping track of your history, all you have to do, um, if you have unstaged changes that completely break your project, all you have to do is git reset dash dash hard and then head. That should work, and that will completely reset the state of your project to whatever the last commit was that you've checked out. Um, so keeping track of everything that you've done as often as possible, and I'm not the best at it, but like my final project, if I go to my profile here, I have 54 commits. So every day, I was making commits for new features that I added. Now I wasn't the best at it because uh, I didn't really have the discipline to make sure that like bug fixes got mixed in with feature commits and things like that. But I did try to give myself, a lot of leeway to go back in the history if I needed to. Um, mhm. Yeah, and I think a lot of people, they only had the one because the only reason they had the Git was to push it onto GitHub, and so yeah, my hope is this will help them out. Right. Hmm. Hmm. Right. And right, exactly. And you don't even have to push it. You can just make a commit and push once a day back to your main repo if you want. That's the distributed nature of Git coming into play. So your local repo on your computer has all of the history in it. And when you push, what you're doing is you're pushing the history onto a remote server. So yeah, just make a commit as often as it makes sense to, for sure. So traditionally, the primary branch for Git, it was Git master. It was the master branch. But recently they started changing it to main, but the Git project hasn't made that change yet, and the GitHub uh, project has. So that's where the conflict is. You can actually change the default main branch, and I forget the command to do that, so let's look it up. Now, there's an option also when you install Git Bash to use main as the default branch. But yeah, let's look it up here. GitHub Docs. I'm not looking at for how to do that on GitHub. Let's try Stack Overflow. Okay, it's git config. I'll link this into the chat, or actually, I'll link, like, how do you link the actual answer? I know there's a way to do that. share, copy. So if you do git config dash dash global, init.default branch main, that will change the default branch to main, and you won't ever have to deal with that conflict again. So, hmm? Hmm. Yeah. So what it will do, right? It should only down. I believe it only downloads the changes. Yeah. Um, mhm. Yeah. No, it's only changed files that get downloaded. As long as you have uh, the full history on your local machine and you type git pull, so you would do this git pull, and that would pull the most recent changes from a remote branch. It will only download the changes from what you've got, like the newest commits. No, I don't know anything about how Unity organizes its projects. Yeah, man. It is a lot. That's the, yeah. Yeah, that's not a workshop, man. That's a whole class. Sure. Yeah, just you know, it's a lot. Yeah, there you go. Um, but yeah, what you're learning using Git Bash. So Bash is the default command line environment for most Linux distributions. So all of the commands like ls and cd and all of that, those are the same commands that you would use in Linux. So you're already learning a little bit about how to use Linux now. But yeah, it's a whole thing.